Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews, and convention panels. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
As I walked in and went,
I can moderate if you guys want, as long as I know what the panel is.
Oh, that
would work too.
Yeah.
There you go.
Don't worry about that because we never do anyway.
We'll make up something. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So this is the not in my business sector, our love and hate relationship with AI. So
Is that it?
well, that's the title. That's the whole title. Yeah. So the description is, remember when we were all excited about the possibilities of AI? It could do all those things we've always want done. Then all of a sudden they figured out how to make it do your job. Now we hate it. So now what?
All right, I can moderate it if you want.
Or we could just make up something as we go along. It's 9 o'clock on Friday nights. Who knows where this panel will go.
Ross, pull out your computer and get the AI to run it.
Well, there we go. Let's ChatGPT ask us questions.
Okay, here's the first part of the AI panel. Does everyone know what ChatGPT is in French? Literally, it's cat I farted. Now you've all been culturally enriched in a way that just by coming to TusCon.
Wonderful.
Maybe we should introduce ourselves so these people know who.
Maybe we don't want them to.
Maybe.
Okay, well, I'm Ross Lampert. These are the 3 novels I've got out right now. I am currently in the late throes of putting together a 6-book series for writers on how to do critique and how to find someone to do critique to, for, on, or with. The first of those books to go to the editor is already back from her, and number 2 will be going to her next week, and number 3 will be going to her at the beginning of December, and then there are the other 3 yet to be finalized, quote unquote. So that's keeping me kind of busy.
No, I'm David Lee Summers, and by day I write science fiction, fantasy, horror. I've just published 12 novels. I have a 13th in the work with an amazing cover by Chas Kemp. And that should be coming out, I would say, early 2024. And just sold my 100th short story, and by night, I operate telescopes up at Kitt Peak National Observatory, where I actually do some work with machine learning type technology, and my daughter got her degree at Tulane, getting her capstone in machine learning. So I can at least pretend I know a little something about AI.
Nice. I'm Carolyn Kay. I write steampunk fantasy and now military science fiction. My latest novel is in the Four Horsemen universe, for those who are familiar. It is about a new mercenary unit called the Gunpowder Geishas. So there's a little bit of AI in that, and so, but my main, I guess, interaction with machine learning more specifically is I do spatial data for the state of Colorado. So I'm using a lot of satellite imagery and doing spectral analysis using classified, not classified as in government classified, but it's a type of machine learning that will classify irrigated acreage. So I know all about what's grown in Colorado.
And I think that makes a good point about AI. We've started using this term AI and artificial intelligence, but I think a lot of what we mean by it these days is machine learning. You toss a bunch of artwork at a computer, have it look at it, run some algorithms to try to figure out how to mix and remix it. You look at...
I apologize, I'm a little bit late.
No
That's
problem.
right, we're still sort of introducing ourselves, so.
And then we, you throw some writing at it, you have it mix, have it try to analyze the styles and then try to duplicate those. And that's really what we're kind of at as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. And so a lot of it really is machine learning rather than being artificial intelligence in the sense of Hal sitting there and chatting with you during the day and then trying to kill you. Will.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's William Herr. I'm an author and I am a fat, dumb, ugly truck driver. And they give me free beer for coming to these panels. So having said that, I haven't set anything up because I absolutely thought that I had more time to get here. I apologize. I have been working extensively with AI, and I can tell you that AI it's a trope, but AI is the equivalent of having a very small elf in your computer, which wants really bad to help, but is in fact quite drunk, much like myself. That being said, those people who embrace AI in the industry are going to be the voices of the future, and those people who oppose it are going to be the voices of the past, much like those who opposed Photoshop in the past, those who opposed airbrushing long in the past. I'm old enough to remember it. It is a tool which is going to be there and which is going to be used, and it is now our obligation in a post-real society where all of our information is provided to us by an algorithm which tells us what we want to hear, to differentiate what we want, what we don't want, and what we choose to believe.
Okay, on that note, we're done.
Sorry about that.
No.
Not to put a downer on it or anything like that.
No.
But there's an important point there, because for us who are trying to create with this new tool, the challenge for us is to figure out how to use that tool while the tool is still being built. It's the old joke in the aviation world about you're building the airplane while you're flying it. It's the same kind of thing here.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. But the real challenge is to keep up with the technology as it's developing.
Yes.
Okay, and to understand the development of the technology as it's developing.
Yeah.
I recently spoke with a logistics company because I work in logistics, and I wanted to implement AI to manage their scheduling. It would have replaced a job, which is the focus of this panel. It would have replaced a job, but it would have done it much more efficiently. Right? Now, 20 years ago, we were talking about the same thing about robotics, and now there is an outfit called ES3, New York, Pennsylvania, close to where I'm from, which is the largest distribution center in the nation for groceries, which is almost 100% robotic. Robots go back and forth, grab the stuff, deliver it to the loaders who put it on trucks. The only people who actually do any, the only human beings who actually do any work are the forklift drivers who grab pallets off of a conveyor belt and put them on trucks, and they don't get to decide how they're put on. It is lousy. They misload trucks more often than they load them correctly. However, they get better every single time. A little bit better, amazingly better. I think that AI has to learn how to do what it wants to do. But once you've built the hyper network, once you've built the LoRa's, you don't have to worry about it.
I think one of the challenges there is figuring out what it is you want the AI to do, and then making sure that it's doing it in a way you understand. Because that's, in another life, I am still very much in contact with the military, and of course there's a great deal of discussion about AI in the military, and the thing that keeps coming up, and appropriately so, is transparency. How do we know what the AI is thinking? How do we know what decisions it's making as it's doing all of these things? And we're going to have the same thing in the creative world as well.
Yeah, I'm going to take a pro AI stance on this. Okay, simply because I've looked at the studies, done intense research into the studies. The major study that I'm impressed by, they did a study with doctors, and they used AI to diagnose patients.
Yes.
And the AI outperformed the doctors, not because the AI was smarter, but the AI had no prejudice.
And it also had access to all of the knowledge base,
Right.
where any given doctor knows what they know, and they know a lot, hopefully, but there are other things that they either never learned or have forgotten.
Right.
That
The AI had a 70% success rate, whereas the doctors had a 15 to 40% success rate, and largely it was because the doctors had prejudices. If you're female, you need to lose weight. Okay. If you're black, maybe you have sickle cell anemia.
So we have
Okay,
a doctor
if you're-
in the back here.
I know the study you're talking about. There are actually some huge flaws with that study,
Okay.
partly because the diagnoses were pre-established before they did the study. So you present not a live patient to the doctor. You present a set of data to the doctor.
Which is
And
appropriate.
present a set of data to the AI.
Right.
There's a difference in the interaction that you obtain when you're dealing with a live patient. And when they looked at a similar situation where it was real time, the doctors outperformed AI almost every time.
Okay.
Wasn't there a Grey's
Okay.
Anatomy episode about that?
I don't know. I just know the Harvard study that you're talking about,
Right.
where they looked at this stuff. And there's a real difference between reviewing a case report or reviewing a set of data and interviewing a live patient.
I absolutely
And that is where AI falls down. Now, we are currently using AI quite heavily in the intensive care unit. Because often everything we do with surgical intensive care, at least, is data driven. So there are algorithms, RSNet protocol for managing a ventilator in a patient with adult respiratory distress syndrome.
Absolutely.
If you follow the protocol, don't think, just follow the protocol, you have a 20% better survival rate. I participated in developing that protocol. It is all very well vetted, and there's no reason other than not trusting the machine that you couldn't let the AI actually adjust the ventilator. You simply get the parameters. Okay, you're on 50% and 5 a peak. Okay, we're dialing the ventilator down to this level.
I would like to interject that it is absolutely appropriate that we not trust the algorithm, that we have an individual who is making the final decision, because there are parameters which the algorithm or the AI would not interpret correctly, which the individual could, and the AI is not able to take responsibility for action.
That's the key right there.
Whereas the individual
The
can.
individual So the way that some of these protocols work, is that they're extremely well vetted. You follow the protocol. You almost don't have to think, except when you do.
Right.
And that's the distinction. The clinician knows when he has to think. The same is true of glucose control. We are really horrible at glucose control in the intensive care unit because everybody's afraid of getting the blood sugar too low. That's a real bad thing. It kills brain cells, everybody dies. We've found out that too high is really bad too. But people are more willing to let it go high than go low. Well, there's a whole, what's called the Libra protocol. You follow this protocol, you'll maintain your blood sugar between a range of 70 and 180. And it has precise insulin delivery and an insulin drip. But we can't get approval to let the AI manage the drip.
Totally understand. And a lot of it, I hate to use the term FUD,
Yeah.
FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because it's used for people who don't believe in cryptocurrency, and personally I think they can all take a flying leap at a rolling
Well,
donut.
I can't even get some of my intensivists to follow this ARSNet protocol. I'm going to make it up as I go along. It's like, no, dude, it doesn't work that way.
The thing is that just like any technology, I think that we're going to ease ourselves into it, and it's going to become, in 10 years, it's going to become standard. And
Well, yeah,
it's the people who know how to manipulate this and how to ensure that it's working correctly who are going to be the people who are making the money, while the other people are complaining about the fact that it stole their jobs.
You guys had a question or comment?
I'm just going to keep it to a question, and I kind of like to hear from everybody, so maybe start on this end.
Sorry, I've been talking too much.
That's cool. So, just a real honest opinion from everybody. Do you feel, honestly, no matter how much time it takes, that AI could actually replace human beings? Because that's ultimately, I think, what all the questions come down to.
I would say no, with regard to certain respects, but really you have to break that question down. An AI is never going to father a baby. So there's that. But if we take it down into the realm of people doing work, then things are going to change significantly. And as Will was saying earlier, there are going to be jobs that are going to be lost. There are also going to be jobs that are going to be created. So we're going to see how that all plays out. But there will be fairly significant potentially disruption as time goes on.
Okay, well, let me break it down a little bit.
Okay.
I'm pretty selfish, so I really only care about the creative arts.
Sure.
Because, you know.
Yeah.
But, so, like, for writers, for actors, for authors, for artists, etc.,
Sure.
do you guys honestly feel that that human beings could ever be replaced? So, just in that specific arena.
Is that specifically arena? I would say, I still want to say no. And I'm saying that because, for example, an AI can't write a memoir the way a human would because it will not have lived that person's life.
But it could have studied that person's life.
I have a point on all of this,
Okay.
but I will wait till
Okay.
before you say. But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted, I apologize.
So, how AIs develop over time and your point about studying, we're going to see how close that study can get to lived experience. I think that's a major unknown.
My point on that is what's really different about an AI studying life and writing a memoir and cultural appropriation. At what point is an AI unable, because it's unable to live an experience, is it basically essentially just copying the way that, say, I would try, if I were to try to write the Black experience or the Asian experience? I haven't lived that experience. The AI never will have lived that experience. The AI could eventually, maybe an AI could get to a point where it could write an AI memoir of the AI's experience, and that would be completely legitimate. But I think in that sense, an AI could never replace a human. I have run into cases, and I'm not ignoring.
I know. Go ahead, Dave. I think we've even talked about this before,
right. Yeah, I think there's that appropriation aspect of it. I kind of got derailed. Just to kind of come back to, I've actually known authors who have been approached by their publishers, and these are not small publishers, not small authors who were told, the author said, I'm running up against a deadline. And their publishers come back and said, why don't you just have ChatGPT write this for you? And, it was just kind of this shocked reaction.
ChatGPT couldn't do it.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
not yet. I think.
But go ahead.
I think to your point, I think in some ways in the creative arts, and we're already kind of seeing it, where you have prescriptive, iterative, or very formulaic things. AI is really good at that until it starts feeding on itself, and then those little errors start multiplying. So, especially with the art, you could tell AI because people had weird fingers, they had more fingers, they had less fingers, they had fingers going in weird directions.
Very large tracts of land.
Yeah, things got, ears were not level, and perspective was skewed. And it got better, but now it's getting worse again because it's feeding on itself, because a bunch of artists have gone, no, you're not scraping my work.
Yeah.
So now it's feeding on itself, and I think it's going to have peaks and valleys where it's going to be okay, and then it's going to get worse, and then it's going to get a little bit better. And I think you are going to have people who are going to use it to finish their books or write a series or whatever. And they'll maybe get an audience for it at a certain level, but are they ever going to be bestsellers?
Yeah, and I think it goes to, there are probably tools in here that are good. Like some of the AI grammar checker tools.
They're fantastic. Yay, commas, they catch my commas.
Anyway, Bruce.
I was going to say there are a couple areas where I think AI might be able to replace human writing, and that would be strictly technical writing.
Mm-hmm.
It's already happening.
Or journalism. If it's not straight up reporting, not so much investigative, but this happened. Here are all the people who were involved.
I guess
Here's how many people died.
I guess the question there comes is, where does the ultimate input, though, for that come from?
Well, that would have to come from, you can get that from various sources, police records and all kinds of things.
So ultimately there is a human, though, doing some input, but then the AI looks at.
The AI is conglomerating this into a single coherent story.
Right.
We're already, and again, getting back to medicine, we're looking at doing progress notes.
If I could actually
Because they're very stylized. There's a very set pattern to them. And all you do have to do is plug in the data.
Right. If I could actually answer Chaz's question real quick.
Yeah.
Chaz, as an artist, you have studied art your entire life. You have studied the masters. You have seen their styles. You have copied their styles, and you've developed your own style based on what you have learned. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what the AI is doing, only it is doing it much, much, much quicker. It's building hyper networks and LoRa's, and one day it will analyze your style and will say, hey, here is another style that with hard outlines and watercolors. Okay. That is no different than what you have done. However, it will not really have soul because it will not develop anything new. It will not create a new style.
Right. I will respectfully disagree with you at one point, but please continue.
No, please go ahead. It just heard me out.
The one problem that AI has currently, in my opinion, and I will keep this really, really short. And I believe it's a problem that we'll always have with regards to creative writing, with regards to art. Yes, it can imitate. I can imitate. That part's cool, and yes, you're right about that. AI does not and will never have the ability to be able to criticize its own work. It can't do it because it doesn't actually know what it's doing. It's a program. It follows an algorithm. So you can tell it what a car is, what an automobile is. You can say, this is a Ferrari. You can show it a million pictures of Ferraris, and then the AI will go, it's a Ferrari because that's what you've told me it is. But it doesn't actually know what it's doing. You can't actually look at what it's doing and say, I'm creating a piece of art, I'm drawing a Ferrari, but I'm going to do kind of some cool things with it, because it doesn't know what a Ferrari is. It doesn't really know what art is. It just knows what you told it. And that will never change because it is not self-aware.
Absolutely agree. The AI does not recognize the reality of what it is doing.
Correct.
Now, to a degree, that is an asset. To a degree, that is a liability. It is an asset in that it can make decisions based on data, which it does not have a physical stake in because it is not physical.
Right.
The liability is that it cannot make value decisions because it does not have values.
Correct.
And it will never have values, no matter how much we program it, no matter how heavy the level of programming, it will always be someone else's values imposed upon the AI.
Right, and I'm not saying that AI doesn't have value in terms of art, because you can certainly look at it. I've looked at it for inspiration and things like that, with composition and stuff, and that's cool. So I'm not saying it will never have value. What I'm saying is that it is not self-aware, nor will it ever be.
Yeah.
Because
So
again,
you can't call it art, you can only call it...
you can call it what you want. You know, you pay for the program or whatever, you can call it what you want.
Yeah, you call it what you want.
But the problem is that, well, not a problem, but artists, whenever I do a piece, I'm making a million corrections as I draw. If something doesn't look right, I'm correcting it. If that doesn't look right, I'm correcting it. I look at the whole piece when I'm finished with the sketch, and I look at it and go, oh, and I flip it around and look at it and go, okay, I need to change this. The perspective is off there. AI won't be able to actually...
You're making decisions based on an aesthetic, whereas the AI is only going to be copying some other aesthetic when it...
And it doesn't know what it's copying, it can't analyze it. It doesn't know what it's looking at because it doesn't understand.
Right. And a good example of that is we just ran into it at work at the Kip Eaton Observatory just a couple of weeks ago. We have an instrument that for years has been, just a machine running. It's a multi-object spectrograph, and what this has is it has fiber optics that are set in a focal plane. Light comes in from objects from outside, and there's basically a glorified crane machine that picks these up and puts them in different positions on the target. The old way of doing this was you just had it remember where the fiber was before, move it, remember where you have put it down. We've now added machine learning to this so that because if that ever failed, you got off a few encoder counts on that crane machine part of it, that what we call the gripper, it would... you had to have a human come in and look at it and figure out where the actual button is. So what we've done is introduced machine learning to be able to recognize the button. But here's the trick of that. You change the LEDs at all, change the intensity, you change what the LED set looks like. Suddenly it says, I don't recognize any buttons on this plate. And it's just like it was before.
You changed the color of your pants.
I think we've had some questions over here.
I was thinking of taking an AI chatbot or whatever for a test run by converting a book to a screenplay.
I doubt that would be effective, unless you had
But I would consider what it puts out to be an outline, because I think it would be very flat.
Yeah, you would teach you would have to build a hyper network of multiple books which have been converted into screenplays, or a LoRa, a hyper network or LoRa. Multiple books would be which had been converted into screenplays, to teach it how to actually do that. And in the end, you would end up with a system which almost but not completely did the job, but still needed the input of a human being.
That's what I thought. Now, a friend of mine took a book and converted it from third person to first person using an AI.
Use it easy enough because all you're doing is converting
And
a person.
there were a lot, he had to go through it in detail because there were a lot of mistakes. But it's a starting point to go through rather than you starting from scratch and rewriting
Do you
everything.
understand why there were so many mistakes? Because the AI bears no responsibility, nor does it feel any responsibility for its errors. It has no ego.
It just spits it out.
Yeah, it spits it out based on the parameters that it's given.
Right.
It does not think, wow, you're going to think worse of me if I don't do this. Even if you give it a point system, which we had with certain military trials. You give it a point system where you're successful, you get so many points, and if you're unsuccessful, you lose points. Even so, it's got no responsibility. It doesn't feel bad, it doesn't feel good, it has no ego, it doesn't want to succeed, it just wants to finish.
Well, and AI doesn't understand nuance. Because even when you're
That's
transcribing...
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, from
It's
third
flat.
person to first person, it can, Grammarly can probably do that decently, but it's still going to miss those things where there's some ambiguity.
Someone's speaking, it's within quotations, and I'm saying, and you're describing, the person's describing something in third person that wouldn't change.
Well, you would put feelings in it because it's first person.
Right.
But the AI doesn't know what those would be.
Right.
I'd like to make a comment. I use ChatGPT a lot in my writing, and some of the things saying really isn't true. ChatGPT, now again, one of the problems with ChatGPT is a lot of people use the free version of ChatGPT, which is 3.5, which is crap compared to the one you pay for, which is 4. You can ask ChatGPT to analyze writing. It's extremely adept at analyzing writing, and you can ask it to grade you, and you get whatever criteria. Now, it isn't consistent. It sometimes might give you a B or an A or whatever, but the relative things of, like, let's say plot versus pacing or something, it will usually be able to get the relative differences there. But so, like, your thing, like you say, it can never critique itself. It can. It's very good at critiquing itself, but you need to give it parameters by which to critique it, and then you have to always understand that you can never really trust it. That's a weird thing about this, is that it speaks with absolute confidence, but sometimes it's just utterly making stuff up.
Right.
It's literally times where you ask it to, like, tell me what you thought of this, and it's talking about stuff that I didn't even write. It imagines that I wrote something that I gave it, right? And it's not even there. That wasn't even part of what I wrote. So it is a very weird tool, but it's very powerful, and it can analyze the shit out of everything. It really can.
I will admit that out of a certain level of narcissism, asked ChatGPT to review one of my books. And it became very evident that ChatGPT had no idea what my book was about.
Well, the biggest problem with ChatGPT in terms of doing analysis like a book is it only has a limited amount of token length that it can consume.
Right.
And so this is the biggest deal when you're trying to do any writing, is that, and it's getting better, once the ChatGPT 4 Turbo comes out soon, that's going up to 128,000 tokens, I think. It's a lot, but still, a lot of times when I feed stuff in, I'm pretty much just limited to like about 2,400 words that it can analyze. So something like a book is much, much longer. And so the only way to have it do any kind of analysis, and it's only really very rudimentary, is you feed in chunk by chunk, have it do a summary, create the summary, and then you feed something in, and then you get something.
Or it reads reviews that other people have given of the same work and summarizes those reviews.
But then it's not doing the analysis itself.
No, it isn't. But then again, does the ChatGPT really care?
No. Well, I think the question is it doing analysis at all?
It is. It is.
I would argue that it's not. I would argue that it's basically trying to tell you what it thinks you want to hear, but it's just a bunch of words that it's spitting back at you because it's not actually analyzing it.
Let me put it this way. I got a review on the Captivity of Choice. The guy ripped me a new one. Okay, absolutely tore me to shreds because I had killed off the one character with which he truly associated. Okay, never mind that the character was part of the problem that had caused the major problem in the whole point, and that he was just getting poetic justice. I had killed him, and that was wrong, and there was no reason to read this damn book anymore. Okay? ChatGPT would never give me that, because ChatGPT doesn't care whether Renault dies. Okay?
No, but it would say for some, for stuff like that, it would say, like, for some readers, they may be attached to this particular thing, so you might consider how you treat it. It could give you feedback like that.
However, I printed out that review. I framed it and I put it on my wall. Okay. Because I had so affected somebody that they were willing to rip me to shreds over that review.
Yes.
And that's something I couldn't get out of ChatGPT. Now, mind you, ChatGPT will not troll me.
Unless you ask it to.
Yeah.
ChatGPT's biggest weakness in doing any kind of reviewing is simply this. It can read and understand anything.
Mm-hmm.
It can read and understand things so much better than most people can. So every time I have a writing class I go to, and I have a critique my work and analyze the shit out of it, and it'll give me all this review, and I do that. And then when I always take it to class, the problem I always get is that people don't follow things as easily as it did. It's like, oh, I don't understand what's going on here. ChatGPT perfectly understood, but they didn't.
Okay, so if you're writing for ChatGPT, then it'll understand. But if you're writing for people, you have to, and let's face it, a lot of times I write things that people just do not understand. My first book was The Collective. Became an international bestseller, okay, for no good reason. I mean, I did not promote it, I did nothing, it just all of a sudden exploded. I got a review on that. It became evident from the review that the person had read the very first chapter and the very last chapter, and then sat back and went, whoa. And that's all they ever read. Okay. And that convinced me that I needed to write the Broken Throne series, which was a dumbed-down version of The Collective. And that's why the first book became Book of the Year, and the second book barely sold 200 copies. But but the point is, we're not writing for ChatGPT. We're writing for human beings. And if what we're writing is not accessible to human beings, but is accessible to ChatGPT, then shouldn't we be adapting our methods so that human beings can understand it? ChatGPT may be able to parse information and process information much better than a human being, but in the end, we're not writing for ChatGPT.
No, I understand, but I'm saying that's its biggest weakness. Its biggest weakness is that it doesn't really understand what we don't understand. It's that because it can process and understand and absorb all these things and get all the minute little details that most people just goes right over them. It gets all that stuff. It has no trouble like being able to understand all these tiny little nuances. It's very powerful at that. But if you're trying to, you're not going to be able to get from it that sort of perspective that a human can give. A human can give you a perspective that you'll never get from something like ChatGPT.
I would never let it become my editor over my current editor.
Well, your point was made where somebody says, a person says, well, I didn't understand this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, ChatGPT has looked back and it doesn't forget. Maybe you need to put a little reminder in there so that your reader then is online and doesn't pause and go, wait a minute, what?
The rule in script writing is tell people anything you want. Just only tell them once. Okay, because if you tell them twice, then it becomes repetitive. With great power comes great responsibility, over and over and over and over. However, the rule with writing novels is tell them over and over and over and remind them what you need them to remember.
Okay.
We had a question.
Yes,
one time ago.
well, not so much a question, but comment.
Okay.
First of all, I'm a software engineer, actually both electronics and software. Been doing it since 1983.
Okay.
I've touched a little bit on this. I prefer calling it machine learning rather than AI. AI is sort of like the cloud. It's a name people tacked on to a certain type of program, and it's still a program. The one thing that I remember when I first started out programming was a term called garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with any type of AI, machine language, or anything else. If you feed the best, perfectly operating AI program garbage, you're going to get garbage out.
Yeah.
And the one difference, of course, is about humans, is a human will eventually realize it can fed garbage. Of course, also, too, I want to make a statement, humans themselves are programmed. You're programmed by your schools, you're programmed by the churches, you're programmed by politicians, you're programmed by the news, media, and everything else, your parents. From the time you're born, you're being programmed.
However, we're adaptive.
Right.
So adaptive
That's what
process.
separates us from the computers.
Oh, just the whole garbage in, garbage out is like, not long, ChatGPT had been out for a little while. And they're like, oh, it's great at doing code. I'm like, sweet, I needed to write me a really simple batch file because I had lost a batch file for like just doing really simple backups. And I'm like, great, it can spit one out for me really quick. So I'm like, hey, ChatGPT, I need a batch file that'll copy things from my C drive to my E drive. Go. And it spit one out, and I'm like, okay, let's see if it works. Nope. Right? And it's like, hey, did I do okay? And I'm like, no, redo it. And it redid it, and it was even worse. Like, it failed even sooner. I was like, okay, let's see, can I word this different? Am I wording it wrong? Because it's like, what am I putting in garbage? So then I'm getting garbage out. And 6 iterations later, and I still didn't have a working batch file. And I finally found the one that actually worked, and I compared it to the ChatGPT stuff, and I'm like, well, you're missing like these entire major sections that make it work. You're programming from like Windows 98, I'm in Windows 10. What are you doing? But
And Microsoft loves to change the program, so
yeah, definitely garbage in, garbage out.
Good. Looks like we have a comment or question in the back.
Never mind. Took me a second to process what you said. Never mind.
Okay.
But David, I want to pick up on something that you said a long time ago in this conversation, and that was about cultural appropriation. I think it was partly in response to your question to us. And the thought that occurred to me, and the answer as I recall it, was that AI would have a hard time at best writing a memoir because it would be appropriating. But as writers, we do that without malicious intent all the time. As you're saying, I have written the story from the person of a black man, from the perspective of a bisexual woman. They're in these books. Is that cultural appropriation? No, it's what we have to do as writers. We have to find a way to kind of fit ourselves into that personality. And so now, as AI databases get better and machine learning gets better, I'm really cautious about never saying never. This thing, they'll never do that. Watch out. Watch out. I'm really concerned about it.
And
Where that might go.
Well, in the end, let's say that AI did do blatant cultural appropriation. Okay. Let's say AI did blatant cultural appropriation, and AI did blatant cultural appropriation with racist overtones.
Mm-hmm.
Who's to blame?
Somebody did that. Now
Who's to blame?
Well, the question is, who asked it to do that?
There you go. Who's to blame? Is it the programmer who set up the initial programming? Is it the learning algorithm? Okay. Is it the people who contributed to the learning algorithm? The internet trolls who went ahead and fed Nazi propaganda to it nonstop. Okay. Who's to blame? And in the end, is there anyone to blame for that? And does that make everything that comes out of that invalid?
And
Or we could just erase it and recreate it.
And there is a good point from that, is an AI ever going to, on its own, initiate a novel, initiate a piece of artwork? Or is it going to require a human to ask it to be part, to use that as a tool for part of that?
No. At what point are you the author of all of your artwork? Or are your parents and your teachers and your friends who built into programming and the connections between your neurons the authors of it? So what we're really talking about is who is responsible for anything in the end. I mean, we choose to say that we are responsible because we feel that we are individual consciousness, despite the fact that all of the cells in our bodies are completely replaced every 7 years. We still choose to choose to say that we are individuals who are responsible for our actions. The AI is a simpler version of this. Maybe not on the level of an amoeba, but maybe on the level of a dog. Okay, on the level of a small child who's able to process information, on the level of an idiot savant. Is an idiot savant not responsible for their actions? Does an idiot savant have a soul? Do any of us have the right or the real opportunity to say, no, this has a soul or this does not, and what is our criteria for that?
That's really not an answerable question.
But I do think there is still a point in there that where is the AI ever actually going to, of its own, decide it wants to create something?
That would be the singularity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now we're getting into going from
True
artificial intelligence to sentience.
Yeah.
And that's a big step, but that's not to say it can't happen.
No, it's not to say it won't happen. Yeah.
Exactly. We in science fiction writers, what do we do? Yeah.
I'm curious to know, what do each of you think of this idea of the singularity, or what AI sentience actually would be? I've never really had people give a very clear definition of that. They always seem to have their own opinion of what they think a sentient AI is. I'm just curious to see what each of you think it is.
What's first of all, you got to take one step back and define what sentience is. And, we get into this kind of infinite regress of well, you got to define this, you got to define that, you got to define something else. Am I avoiding your question? Darn right I am.
do we know what, is anything else sentient? And I think we don't have agreements on that. Are whales sentient? Are they self-aware? Are dolphins sentient, self-aware? Dogs.
I believe octopus is claimers for
right,
some
and it's like
more stuff on the planet.
And it's like we don't know. And I mean, we could probably build even today an AI that would merrily admit, hey, I'm self-aware, and mimic enough things like the Turing test that you might begin to wonder if it's self-aware, but without actually getting into its head.
Right.
Could you know that?
Would we ever really know if? Yeah, like you said, well, because there was the guy at Google who quit Google because he thought their AI was already self-aware because it said things like, I'm lonely, and it's like, well, because you can't get into its head, essentially, you don't know, and maybe
is it feeling lonely?
Yeah, is it feeling lonely? Is it just spitting something out because it wants to keep you talking because it's gathering more data? But yeah, I think sentience I don't know, as a science fiction writer, it can be whatever you want. So again, it's defining it. And I don't know that I actually have
Because we can't get into the head of that other thing, whether it's
an animal life form that
Yeah,
might
or-
very
or
well
not.
be sentient,
All
or
we
a
can do is
computer.
observe the behavior and how it responds to different stimuli. And
I actually approached this question in my last screenplay, aptly called Sentience, and the answer that I gave, maybe not the correct one, was when a construct has the capacity to say no. If you give it an order and it says no, okay, and there is ramification for that no. I mean, you get an engine light, that means no. But just a second. But if it has the capacity to say no, I'm shutting down, you can't do this, then that represents a knowledge of itself and its limitations and an unwillingness to exceed those limitations. Now, what I referenced was Running Bear versus Crook, which was a legal case from the late 1700s, early 1800s, between an American Indian and a U.S. Army general. Thank you. And that particular case established that Indians were human beings, that Indians were sentient because they were able to say no, and they were worthy of habeas corpus. Is that effectively it? How far can you go? This is a question that I explored in it, was how far can you go to, is this programming or is this self-programming, when the system builds learning algorithms and learns about everything around it? At what point does it stop being learning algorithms? At what point does it start being stop being programs? I think the answer is, can you think back to when you were a child and everything was a moment by moment activity and a moment by moment decision, and you didn't really learn anything until it already happened to you? That's AI right now. Okay, and eventually you got to the point where you could plan a couple of minutes or a couple of hours ahead or a couple of days or a couple of months, and you matured, and we're waiting for AI to mature, and I think that is going to happen, but I don't think so. Okay, so
We have a question in the back.
You had a question, sir?
Other than the existential crises you've given me, you just answered the rest of the questions.
I think one of the problems that comes that's kind of inherent with your question, if I may throw this out real quick, is the ability to be able to prove sentience. Because you're going to have a whole bunch of different opinions about what sentience is,
Right.
but until you have a definitive, you need to be able, a human being needs to be able to do these 100 things, which is one of the things that they were trying to do with Blade Runner, for example, is proving sentience. And I think that's where you run into the problem.
And I think that's going to be that's actually an interesting problem, not just from computers, but as we're starting to look for life outside of Earth too. At what point are you seeing, even defining what's life as opposed to essentially program,
I have
organic
a
molecules.
dog who is a very good boy, and I can absolutely guarantee he is sentient. That he can process information separate from me. He can make decisions, almost always the wrong one. But he can make decisions, and he can act on those decisions, and then he can report back to me, and then process initial decisions and learn from those. That the ability to make a decision, process the decision, and then learn from the results of that process has to be the definition of sentience, and a computer can do that within a hypernetwork. Bruce? Yes, sir.
There, not to throw even more existential crises, there is a reductive school of neuropsych psychiatry and neurophysiology that would say, even in human beings, we are nothing more than a collection of pre-programmed responses that are either based on DNA cascades, activation of certain genes and neurotransmitters, and free will, much as we like to think we have it, doesn't exist.
I
Reference
would-
Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who's done extensive work in this and has a wonderful lecture series about it, and it's really scary.
To that, I would respond Gestalt and Frankel.
Could you repeat that?
I would respond to Gestalt and Frankel. Gestalt was a holist, or I would say holistic. He believed in the whole human psyche as a thing. I would also respond to Jung, who believed that that we should not study so much the abnormal psychology, but we should study the extraordinary psychology, psychology of extraordinary people, because if you study abnormal psychology, everything you find will be abnormal. If you study extraordinary psychology, you will find that which is extraordinary. And Frankel, who believed he knew better and he would tell you what to think.
And that's time.
Okay.
Oh, well.
I'm sorry if I dominated. I especially apologize for showing up late. I strictly tried to show up on time, but then I got in a deep conversation with somebody on something which meant absolutely nothing. Yeah.
I cannot believe that you could get into a deep conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play-In Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, please check out D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Ragnarok Enroll a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Story. Also, check out our Patreon page for more content and behind-the-scenes things, as well as joining us for a one-shot game or two.